comes to passive aggressive communication, a lot of times the struggle is we fail to acknowledge our own accountability. We're seeing what the other person does, whether they actually do something or they just don't do it. We see what the other person is doing, but we struggle to see what we're doing. And in fact, that's what makes this particular style so tricky. And that's why it's a lot of indirect type of actions and statements, just because when we use this style, we actually struggle to accept accountability. And so our statements are so vague and it's so gray area that if a person chose to come back and address the issue with you, we find that, you know what, we're able to sneak back out, or I like to say we moonwalk out of taking accountability. So I want to go over some signs. One, subtle. Like I said, it's all about indirect. And so you may find that when we use this particular communication style, we use a lot of not in your face type of insults. We also find ourselves doing a lot of joking, and that's one of the key things about passive aggressiveness. Just because a joke is intended to be funny, however, if a joke is actually kind of zinging the other person, it's not a joke. And look at it like this: if we were to tell a joke about someone, they're the butt of the joke. If I'm mentioning that person in my joke, in order for it to be considered a good joke, I want to make sure that person's laughing, okay? Because it's supposed to be a joke about them. So I want to make sure they're laughing. So if that person is not laughing, it's not that they're sensitive or they can't handle a joke. Maybe you just told a bad joke. And that's what we find with passive aggressiveness, is that we do a lot of backhandedness. There's a lot of things behind the scenes that go on. It's a lot of indirectness. We joke. And then when the person calls, us out, I was just joking. Why are you so sensitive? You need to learn how to take a joke. It's things like that which invalidates. Again, going back to that definition, it invalidates, and we refuse to acknowledge that person when we joke. When we joke at the expense of them. When we were talking about the person who uses passive communication, they don't like conflict, right? They avoid conflict head on, like directly. They do not do well with direct confrontation. They usually avoid it. This is still the same for passive aggressive communication, where we find ourselves avoiding a direct conflict or direct opportunity to interact. However, we're still going to have some conflict. We just don't come about it directly. We do it in an indirect manner. So instead of approaching that person and talking to that person that you find yourself being angry with or frustrated with, we don't talk to that person. In fact, we do a lot of gossip. We actually, instead of talking to that person, we talk to everyone else about that person. And the reason why this is actually still a form of aggressiveness is because, one, that person is not in that room to defend themselves. You do not give that person a fighting chance. You actually place them at a disadvantage. So that's another tricky thing about gossip. Another thing too is you're sharing your perspective. And even Usher said there's three sides to the story. There's one side, there's the other side, and then there's the truth. So when you remove that opportunity for that person to express themselves, you actually are attacking them. It's just indirectly. You may also find that social media, with social media now, is a prime opportunity to use passive aggressiveness, just because you can say whatever you want and not have to address that person, not have to deal directly with that person. And so you may find that there's a lot of comments that go out on social media. However, they do not choose to seek an opportunity to share that with that person who honestly, they have every right to know how you feel. So that's another sign. One of the key signs is actually silent treatment. Here's the thing about silent treatment, and it goes back to the definition of we're failing to acknowledge the other person and we're failing to validate the other person's thoughts, feelings, and needs. Is when we shut down lines of communication, you're not allowing that person to express their need. It's interesting enough that when it comes to passive aggressive, we're okay expressing our need. Again, that's the aggressive part. We're okay saying this is the issue I have, and this is okay. But when that other person decides to or wants to share their perspective, it's a silent treatment. And so while it's not directly, you're not directly like attacking them, you're not directly shutting them down, but by not choosing to have have an interaction, a direction, a bi-directional type of interaction, we're shutting them down. We're exiting. We're counseling out those lines of communication. So we are failing to acknowledge or validate that they have a right to express themselves, because we do not like conflict. And that goes back to that passive component of communication. We want to avoid conflict. However, with passive aggressive communication, there may be times when we do decide to have a confrontation. But here's the thing, when it comes to this particular style, that confrontation is usually happen in a public setting or with other people. Again, we will not go face to face. We will not, interact or go directly to that person alone. When we do decide to go to that person, we usually have I call it backup supporters. We usually have a posse, or it's usually what other people are around. This is a form of attack and a form of invalidating that person, because there's a level of shame involved. Okay? So you're not just subjecting that person to you and what you say, you're doing it in a manner that everybody else can hear. So that's another interesting thing. So this is probably the only time where we do choose to have a direct conflict, is when it's done in a public manner, which shames that other person, or it can be embarrassing to that other person, not considering their needs, by maybe taking that conversation to a more private manner. Some statements that indicate we may be using some passive aggressive communication style. Backhanded compliments. Oh, wow, you did your hair today. It looks so good. See that? Okay, you did your hair today, as if you didn't do your hair any other day. Or, oh, you look so cute today. Again, emphasis that do you not look cute the other day. If I did anything wrong, I apologize. The thing with that, and if is a conditional, this is actually a word that is a trigger word in counseling that I encourage people to recognize. If is a conditional word. If, buts, when, those are conditional words. So when you say if, when we use the word if you felt that way, you're indicating that there's a possibility that it really didn't happen. You really didn't do or say what you said. And the others, again, that burden is really on that other person. Instead of saying, you know what, I apologize for doing X, Y, and Z. So when we use if, we're actually discrediting that person and actually invalidating that person, because we're really not accepting accountability. We're just saying, well, I mean, if it happened, I guess okay. Instead of saying it did happen. Why are you getting so upset? It was only a joke. I didn't mean it like that. You took it the wrong way. Again, going back to the aggressive part of this communication style is that you using a lot of you statements comes into play. Again, we're failing to acknowledge what we're doing. It's all about that other person, what they're doing. You took it the wrong way. You're so sensitive. Oh my gosh, learn how to take a joke. Things like that. You're putting the blame on that person, when in truth, yes, that person is accountable for their emotions. However, you're failing to not acknowledge the action you did to elicit that type of response. We choose to use this particular style. We're putting all the responsibility on that other person. Some other statements that we may find, again, silent treatment. It's silence. There's nothing. You're just being silent. Silence does have some benefits to it. However, if it's at the expense where you're able to get out your feelings, but that person isn't able to, that's when it becomes unhealthy. Another sign of passive aggressive communication is when our words do not match our body language. Yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm saying I'm good, but clearly I'm shut off. I'm saying that, everything's okay, but my actions contradict. So with this particular style, again, and it leads to a lot of confusion, is we say one thing, but we actually do another. I'm sorry you felt that way. So you say the word sorry, and of course, sorry is one of the apologetic words, right? However, when you say, I'm sorry you felt that way, you're placing just the entire burden on that person. You're not saying, I apologize because because of my actions, you felt this way. So another sign of passive aggressive communication is There is a deliberate button pushing. There's a deliberate, intentional effort to provoke that other person. So this is actually a sign of attack. So while I may not be like going at you physically, I may not be, talking over you and being loud and boisterous, I may not be shutting you down in that sense, I am choosing to manipulate the situation to get a response out of you. I'm pushing your buttons. I'm pushing your buttons to get a reaction out of you. Alrighty, so some tips, some words of encouragement to motivate you if you do find yourself using passive aggressive communication style. I cannot stress this enough. You are not a victim. You're not a victim. You're a victor just because you have a lot of things in your control. First, start by acknowledging. Instead of acknowledging the things that are outside of your control, which we can't control anyway, acknowledge the things that you do have control over so that it empowers you to take charge of those things and own up to it. Again, we're increasing our responsibility by taking accountability. We're increasing our opportunity for growth by saying, okay, these are the things that I can truly work on. The other thing is, recognize too that while yes, you do have every right to voice your thoughts and your feelings and to ensure that you have every right that your needs are being met, that other person has that same exact right. So be mindful, be considerate. It really goes back to the golden rule of treating people as you would want to be treated. If you know at the end of the day, saying certain things, doing certain things would elicit anger out of you, why subject someone else to that? Not only that, but why subject someone to that and not take accountability of what you're doing? Okay. If you know that you probably wouldn't care too much for a general apology, then don't give a general apology. Take accountability of what you're doing, because you will want them to take accountability. So when it comes to this particular communication style, we're so good at justifying our actions. I say we're good lawyers for ourselves. We're very good at defending ourselves, but unfortunately, we can be very, very good at judging, condemning, someone else. And it looks into hypocrisy when we're accusing that person of doing the very things we're doing. So take accountability in that. Next week, I'm going to talk about assertive communication. Assertive is the best communication style to have. It's the most effective. It's the most productive. It's the most glorious type. I want to go over assertiveness and I want to break that down. I want to break it down in the sense of how we can be assertive when we deal with each and every communication style. So how to be assertive when the other person is choosing to be passive, how to be assertive when the other person is choosing to be aggressive, and how to be assertive when the other person is choosing to be passive aggressive. So I want to break that down because I really want to encourage the opportunity where we're feeling heard, we're feeling that our voice and our thoughts are validated, but at the same time we're also acknowledging and validating that other person. Until next time, you guys, cannot believe it is the end of the month already. It's summer. It's hot, but it's summer and I'm excited. So until next week, y'all, God bless.